today?
Well,
Early briefing.
yes.
Your colleagues still rolling in. I have two quick items at the top, and then Matt, I'm turning it over to you. First, the White House announced today that on Monday, April 20th, President Obama will meet at the White House with the Deputy Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, to consult on a wide range of regional and bilateral issues. As you know, we work together and talk about regional issues, whether it's Iran, whether it's ISIL, violent extremism. So obviously, we're looking forward to that visit. I just wanted to highlight that for people. And then I want to welcome the FSI class of Department Foreign Service officers in the back. These folks will be department information officers and assistant information officers at posts around the world. I think they're heading out to places like Burundi, Afghanistan, the Gambia, Mali, Macedonia, South Sudan, and Latvia. So thank you for coming. There's more of you today than reporters, so you can just feel free to start asking questions too. But thanks for coming, and happy to have you heading out to posts soon.
Did you say Maui or Mali?
Mali.
Oh,
I said it
too
with
bad.
my Ohio accent, which
Too bad.
sometimes
Maui would be nice.
I did not. Who wants to go to Maui? I said Mali,
All right.
with a little bit of a Midwest accent,
Gotcha.
which I caught as soon as I said it.
Can we start with Iran?
We can.
And the secretary was
Yep,
up
he's
on the
still
Hill
there. He's still there.
yesterday and again this morning.
Yep, he's still there right now. as we
Judging by the meetings themselves,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the reaction from lawmakers as they came out, how would you say these briefings have gone? Because it certainly doesn't appear that any minds have been swayed.
Well, I haven't done a full survey of everyone who was in the meeting on the congressional side, but I know the Secretary values the consultation, values the ability with his colleagues, Secretaries Lew and Moniz, to go into more details with them up at the Senate right now. So I think we'll let those conversations continue and certainly speak for themselves.
Okay. Well, just two of the more colorful responses that I saw last night from House members were, one, that this is it's not a deal, it's total surrender. That was one. And then another one was that I can't remember which congressman it was, but said he had the sense that Secretary Kerry was trying to sell him a car. How
is
is
there
it?
a question?
Yeah. How are you? These people do not seem. Are you of the feeling that minds have been made up and can never be changed? And
No,
if you,
of course not. I
Okay,
think
well
that
then-
we've heard from a lot of members of Congress who value the fact that we are coming to speak to them. I think very much value Secretary Moniz, for example, walking through why we are confident in the science behind what we've already agreed to. And I know that those conversations are continuing. So some people's minds may already be made up. I think what we have said to them is, before making up your mind about an agreement that's not even a final agreement yet, hear from the experts who are in the room, who are doing the scientific calculations. I think that's a key part of members of Congress deciding where they fall on this.
so you still think that people are can be convinced
I do.
that this is?
I do.
Okay. Well,
I do.
good luck on that. But
Thank you, Matt. I
You're welcome.
appreciate the well wishes.
yeah.
Anything else?
Foreign Minister Zarif said that the next round is going to be I think the 21st. He said.
Right, and we always, as you know, defer to the EU as
That
the
sound about
coordinating party to make an announcement as to the specifics of the next meeting between the P5+1 and Iran. As I said yesterday, we expect to reconvene with the parties next week at the expert level and possibly the political director level, but we don't expect Secretary Kerry or Foreign Minister Zarif will be a part of that.
Where that?
We
might be?
don't. The details are still being worked out.
Can I just go back to the Senate? And
You can.
yesterday, Senator Bob Corker said on CNN, this is before the Secretary went up to brief, that he believes they could be close to getting the 67 votes they need in the Senate to override any kind of presidential majority, which would then give Congress an oversight, a review of any final deal. Do you think that's likely? Do you think that's possible?
I think the conversations are ongoing, and I understand that the committee is marking up the bill this afternoon. I don't want to get ahead of that process and what the final legislation that comes out of that markup ends up looking like. So we've had many, many conversations. As yesterday, I was looking for some numbers, and I have them here today. The president, vice president, cabinet members, and other administration officials have made over 130 phone calls alone to members of Congress since the announcement of the parameters of a joint comprehensive plan of action. So that's just since April 2nd. So we've had many, many consultations, both on what's in the agreement, what's been agreed to so far in the parameters, but also on what possible oversight role in legislation might look like, and I don't want to get ahead of today's markup.
But do you envisage some kind of role for Congress?
Absolutely.
Of this deal?
Absolutely. We always have said that.
There was, I think it was Senator Rich was just talking again to CNN, saying that he believed that the Congress should have a vote after you've hammered out the final details. Would that be more acceptable than a vote?
Well, at a
Before.
baseline, we've always said they will have an eventual vote to lift sanctions, that only a vote by Congress can eventually terminate U.S. sanctions when it comes to the sanctions they put in place. So that's always been a way they would be able to vote. But again, I don't want to get ahead of the conversations with Congress right now. The secretary's up there as I speak. I think we'll probably have more to say about this in the coming
Yeah, I
days.
don't think he was talking about a vote on the sanctions. He was talking about a vote on what
I know,
deal
but I was
you
saying they
reach.
will have, in order to fully implement the agreement, at a baseline, they will have a vote on terminating sanctions. So that has always been the case. But in terms of what the legislation might look like, again, those conversations are ongoing, and I just don't want to get ahead of them.
Can I turn to something that I saw Senator Corker as being quoted as saying? Quote, by the way, I know they've made comments that somehow they have been working with me. I can tell you nothing could be further from the truth. I've had no conversations about the substance of this bill with any principal, whether it be the President, Secretary Kerry, or others.
I know that President and Secretary have both spoken to Senator Corker. So.
Yeah, that's what I thought, which is why
Yeah.
I wanted to check. And that was, just to be clear, that was about his legislation or about the deal more generally, or both?
About both is my understanding. Check with the White House on the President's call. I obviously am familiar with the Secretary's call, but it was in general about both.
Thank you.
But the draft legislation from about setting aside the one about the possible sanctions, which is a different one, but the Corker co-signed legislation about having a vote or approving the deal, is that something that you intrinsically disagree with, or do you believe there could be a way of writing that legislation that would make it acceptable to the administration?
I think we've been over this a lot, as has the White House. The President has said if the bill comes to his desk in the current form, then we would veto it. He
so
would
there is
veto
a way
it.
to rewrite it to make it
But
acceptable.
what we're talking about, well, we don't know, right? What we're talking about with all these conversations is the possible way we could move forward. Congress's appropriate oversight role. Those discussions are ongoing, and I really just don't want to get ahead of the markup that the Senate committee will be doing this afternoon on this legislation. I think we'll have more to say about this in the coming hours and days as this moves forward.
Do you have any concern that even if this bill comes before the president and he vetoes it, that could have an effect on the negotiations?
In what way?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you seem to be, well, you don't seem to be. You are saying that you're opposed to the legislation in its current form. So, is the concern that even if it's going to be vetoed, if they go ahead, that will also impact the negotiations?
I think let's just see how this plays out over the coming hours and days, and I think we'll have more to say about it as this moves forward. I just don't have much more to offer today.
Well, do you think that once the committee does do the markup, you'll have or the White House will have something to say
I'm
about it?
guessing we may.
You will.
What else? This is a thin crowd today, people.
Well, Yemen.
Sure.
Iran, still stay with Iran, but on Yemen. Foreign Minister Zarif apparently said to Spanish reporters today in Madrid that he's put forward a peace plan for Yemen. Are you aware of this? Has it been communicated to you? Is it something that you might support?
Well, we're certainly aware of what he said in terms of having a plan. Obviously, Iran plays a role here given their support for the Houthi, and I think what would be most helpful from the Iranian side at this point is to respect this newly imposed UN arms embargo that was just passed today and stop supporting the Houthi. So, broadly speaking, of course, we need to get back to the political dialogue, that's always what we've said the way forward is. So whatever Iran can do to push the Houthi to do that, obviously is the direction we need to go in, and want to make sure going forward, now that all countries understand what their obligations and responsibilities under this new UNSCR that, again, was just passed today. So I know those are conversations at the UN that are happening right now.
The call for Iran to abide by the terms of the Security Council resolution is interesting to me. Can you recall because I'm not sure Iran has ever abided by a Security Council resolution.
So we shouldn't try?
Well, I'm not saying that, but I mean, it doesn't, if in fact Iran does not, and I realize this is hypothetical, but it plays into the whole idea of whether Iran is really interested in, or is is committed to upholding its obligations, because it certainly hasn't upheld, or wasn't upholding its obligations under the nuclear-related sanctions.
Right, but it has upheld every obligation under the Joint Plan of Action.
Yeah, but you're talking about enshrining whatever agreement you get, if you get one, in a UN Security Council
Correct.
resolution. And that they haven't abided by them in the past.
I
And so
wouldn't-
why would you expect that they would abide by this
Well,
one on
because-
Yemen now?
Well, you're mixing, I think, 3 or 4 different issues here. The UN Security Council resolution that would be a part of a comprehensive agreement would only be part of this. There would be a joint comprehensive plan of action that they would be required to abide by, as they have with the joint plan of action. And if they don't, there are consequences, right? So that's a little separate. But we think it is important that the Security Council today did adopt this measure to put an arms embargo, a global asset freeze, travel bans, targeted arms embargo, other things as well. And really shows, I think, that the Council will take action quickly in this regard, which is good. But again, we understand the complications here. You are right. Iran has repeatedly been incredibly destabilizing in places in the region. So it's not about hope here. It's about trying to get the parties on the ground in Yemen back to the table. And this is just another tool that's helpful.
On the American citizens who are remaining there, the embassy in Djibouti has received and is helping some that have arrived there with consular
And I
affairs.
have a little bit more information. I think you asked me about what they're doing on the
Well,
ground in Djibouti.
Right. The ambassador said earlier, I think, that they were getting reinforcements to help.
Yeah, so
what does that mean?
Yeah, I have some more information on that. So while awaiting security screening and processing by Djiboutian immigration officials, U.S. citizens and their families have been offered food, water, medical attention, hygiene items, infant care items, access to phones to contact relatives, and when feasible, a place to it's quite hot there, I think a place to stay and remain that's out of the heat and a little more comfortable. These have been much of this food and the items have been provided by embassy employees and local staff, which I think is important. The Department of Homeland Security has granted exceptional authority for the consular team in Djibouti to accept and approve immigrant visa petitions for spouses, children, and parents of U.S. citizens. The State Department is working to transfer immigrant visa cases for recently arrived refugees to Djibouti. We are also increasing consular staffing in Djibouti in order to process petitions for immigrant visa cases as quickly as possible. Also to help help U.S. citizens with Yemeni family members find long-term housing while they work through their options here. So we are doing a number of things in Djibouti. This is where many of the people leaving Yemen have gone. Our ambassador, I think, is sharing some of these experiences on Twitter, so I'd check those out as well.
Yeah, that's where that came from. But do you have a rough estimate? Is it a couple hundred people? How many?
We're not
talking
exactly sure. We've seen, I think he tweeted something like 149 or something like that. We know of a couple hundred. We just don't know if that's everyone. Right. So we don't know how accurate it is.
That's only the ones who have American citizenship. That might not include
Correct.
their families and spouses.
Correct. That is my understanding.
So when you have the DHS has given your people, are they sending people there, or is it they've just basically delegated?
I think our consular team is sending people there.
If you are the wife of an American citizen who is trying to get an immigrant visa, what's the time frame we're talking about?
I don't know what the time frame is. I'm happy to check. I don't know.
But they would have to stay, though, in Djibouti.
Well, they couldn't come to the United States, ostensibly.
Okay,
right.
But the process, though, is not a short one, is it? I mean, it's.
I'm
not saying I'm not making
don't
an
know.
argument that it is.
I'm happy to check. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know if you saw that. Sorry, you're still in Yemen?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I apologize that I missed the top if you've already addressed this, but there were reports out that Secretary Kerry thanked Lavrov for Russia's involvement in using a Russian ship to bring 18 U.S.
I can check on
citizens.
that. We do know that some Americans were able to board a Russian ship, I believe, and I'm happy to thank the Russians publicly for that. The Indians, the Djiboutians, and the Koreans have as well. I can check and see if that came up in the call. I'm not positive.
Are those ships, sorry,
Yeah,
but are those ships still, to your knowledge, are those ships still going back and forth?
I
or
don't
is it
know.
stopped?
I don't know. And as we get that information, we're sending out security messages to
Yes,
U.S.
I saw some of them on the
citizens.
website.
Yeah. So I just don't know.
You don't know there's more today, or
Yeah, we'll get you the latest information, but probably the website's the best place to go.
Okay.
Ukraine?
Ukraine, 6 Ukrainian servicemen or troops are said to have been killed and 12 wounded in the latest fighting. And both sides are trading accusations that the other is building up weaponry and material in areas that they shouldn't under the agreements. What is your comment on this, and are you doing anything to try to de-escalate the situation?
Well, yesterday, as I think you all know, the foreign ministers from Germany, France, Ukraine, and Russia met to discuss the implementation of Minsk. We, I think, welcomed this meeting and think this is an important forum for discussions to continue. We understand that there was agreement to withdraw additional types of heavy weapons and tanks from the front lines and to launch discussions in working groups in the coming weeks as soon as possible. Basically, these are also things we support. But the Russian-backed separatists continue to take aggressive action in Ukraine. They continue to have ceasefire violations reported by the OSCE, access problems on both sides, and the Russian-backed separatists continue to stall Minsk implementation. So we are concerned. I know it'll be a topic of conversation when the Secretary goes to the G7 later today. Ukraine certainly will be, as will some other issues as well.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said about both sides.
That there have been access problems with the OSCE on both sides.
Yes, got it.
Yep.
Could we just, if we haven't got any more on Ukraine, can I just stick with a slightly
You can stick with whatever you want.
tangential
Yes.
Russia question? May 8th is the 70th anniversary.
Yes.
I know that we've already discussed this here and that the Secretary has no plans to go to the parade in
Correct.
Russia.
Correct.
Do you have any indication yet what level of representation the United States may have at that parade?
We
Sorry.
did this last week, but
Oh,
that's
did
okay.
you? I'm
No,
sorry, I
it's
wasn't
okay.
here last week. I apologise.
I'll do it again. I was in
Okay.
Panama, I think, when we did it, so we can just all do
And
it
then
again
also,
today.
if there's any celebrations, commemorations that will be going on here.
Yep. So we, as I think we've said, certainly honor the sacrifice of those who fought against Nazism in World War II, including, I would note, millions of Russians who sacrificed as well. As you know, President Obama and other heads of state met in Normandy last year to commemorate World War II. There are a variety of ways. I think people across the world will honor Victory in Europe Day. On May 8th in Washington, there will be a flyover to mark the occasion here in Washington. I think some European capitals will also be marking that day. At the military parade in Moscow on May 9th, we expect to be represented by Ambassador Teft.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, wait, hold on, let's go back here. Or do you have something related?
It's Russia.
Okay, sorry, stay on Russia.
Well, related to these ships that are in the English Channel,
Uh-huh.
do you have anything to say about this, considering your special relationship with the Brits, who seem to be concerned about it?
Who seem to be what?
Concerned about it.
I would check, I don't think their level of concern has been,
No, but they
Of-
mentioned it.
they mentioned it, right? We certainly recognize the need for routine military training activity. As we've said in the past, any such activity must be consistent with international law and conducted with due regards for the rights of other nations, safety of aircraft and safety of vessels. I think the Russian government probably has more details, but
All right, and
That's
then
where we are.
I'm just wondering, is your unhappiness with the S-300 transfer, has that been conveyed in its entirety to the Russians, or is it still going on? Or was it
well,
only in-
Secretary Kerry
I
conveyed
know,
it yesterday.
But is that?
Pretty high level.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's not high level. I'm just wondering if
we
you're
continue-
finished, if you're
we're-
finished with it, if you've made your, because I noticed that Prime Minister Netanyahu called President Putin today and said, we don't like this either. So I'm just wondering, are
I
you
don't
going to
have
continue to
anything-
press the Russians on
We
this?
will. I don't have anything new to outline for you.
You got asked yesterday about the relationship between the ability of the S-300 to prevent aerial attacks and the credibility of the U.S. threat to potentially use military option against Iran.
I think DoD is probably the best place to answer that question. I spoke with them about this morning, so I'd point you there. I think in general we're confident in our capabilities that we have, but I'm not going to get into more details than that. They may be able to. Yes.
Pope Francis over the weekend and his characterization of the massacre of Armenians by the Ottoman Turks 100 years ago as the first genocide of the 20th century. And since we are marking the anniversary, if you could restate the U.S. position on what happened.
Yes, the president and other senior administration officials have repeatedly acknowledged as historical fact and mourned the fact that 1.5 million Armenians were massacred or marched to their deaths in the final days of the Ottoman Empire, and stated that a full, frank, and just acknowledgement of the facts is in all our interests, including Turkey's, Armenia's, and America's. One of the principles I think that's guided the administration's work in this area and in atrocity prevention more broadly is that nations are stronger and they progress by acknowledging and reckoning with, pretty painful elements of their past. Doing so is really essential to building a different, more tolerant future, and I think that sort of guides how we look at this and other issues.
Any reaction to the Pope?
Nothing beyond what I just said.
So you're asking Turkey to make that public acknowledgement then, is that what you're saying?
And nothing more than I just said.
The Turks recalled their ambassador to the Vatican. Erdogan has said today that he condemns the Pope for these comments. Are you concerned at all at this kind of uptick in tension surrounding it, regardless of the use of the word? or
I
not?
don't think I have much more to say on
Right.
this.
Can you remind us what candidate Obama's position was on the
Happy
Armenia?
for you to check with the 2008 Barack Obama campaign, Matt. I don't speak for them. I speak for the State Department and the
Does
administration.
anyone still speak for the 2008 campaign?
I'm happy for you to call someone and find out.
So I seem to recall that he was in favor of.
I'm happy for you to get in touch with the campaign.
It's interesting how many candidates run on that as that is part of their platform, and then upon winning, change their minds because Turkey is a NATO ally and no one wants to upset them. Is that why?
Why what?
Why the president has revised his position
I'm
on
happy for
whether
you to
what
check
happened
with
was
the
a
White House
genocide?
on the president specifically. As I've
Okay.
said, he has
As-
made clear, and what our
As
policy
it
is
relates to
clear.
the State Department, then, what is the State Department's position?
I just outlined what our position is very clearly.
Are there any plans for any commemorations again, given it's the 100th anniversary?
Let me check. I don't know. Anything else, Abigail?
A Connecticut soldier vanished in a scuba diving trip in Thailand. There have been reports about that.
I hadn't seen that. Happy to
Okay.
check. Yes.
South Korea. Yesterday, South Korean government lifted their travel ban for Japanese journalist, Sankei Shimbun journalist, Mr. Kato. He is accused of defaming President Park. Do you have any comment on the issue and the South Korean humanitarian situation?
Well, in terms of this specific exit ban being lifted by the sole prosecutor, we're certainly aware of those reports. We've seen them and have been following the investigation since its initiation closely. Don't have much more to say than that.
Did the U.S. government make some effort to lift the ban?
Well, it's a decision for the sole prosecutor's office. I just don't have more for you than that. Yes.
Leader of the Bosnia's ruling party told Bosnian media over the weekend that the party will vote on and adopt a resolution calling for a free and independent Republic Srpska, seeking independence from the rest of Bosnia. And the party leader said that it's a move in response to increasing, say, by other ethnic groups on Bosnian Serb positions in key institutions. So what is any concern about what something like that
the
might
U.S.,
do?
we've long said that territorial integrity and sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina are guaranteed by the Dayton Peace Accords. Neither the Constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina nor, I think, any other part of the Dayton Accords offers any entity the right to secede, and any action taken towards the dissolution of Bosnia and Herzegovina would violate the Dayton Accords. Yes, anything else? Abigail.
It's the anniversary of the kidnapping of 200 girls in Nigeria, and I was wondering if you had any comment on that, or what the involvement still is of the U.S. to help locate the girls.
Well, as you know, as we talked about, we've been involved for some time here. And again, on this anniversary call for all hostages held by Boko Haram, including these girls, to be released immediately without preconditions. We have supported Nigerian efforts to bring about the safe recovery of those who've been kidnapped, certainly not just the girls, but others as well. Secretary Kerry, when we were there in Lagos in January, made an important point about Nigeria having peaceful and credible elections in order to effectively combat Boko Haram. And as we've seen with the conduct of the recent elections, as well as I think President Jonathan's statesmanship in accepting the results, that this, I think, bodes well for ongoing and future counterterrorism actions. And President Buhari has indicated that he wants to focus on counterterrorism as well. We still have an interdisciplinary team in Abuja that consists of specialists on temporary assignment and personnel assigned to the embassy from a number of U.S. government agencies. The number varies from time to time depending on specific assistance being requested by the government, whether this can be staff already in Abuja or whether we need to send new people. So we've continued to help both in the search, providing training, equipment, to try and help them find not just the girls, but all of those kidnapped by Boko Haram. Anything else? Thank,
Yeah, I just had one, this is a logistical thing about,
Okay.
about Lubec. Does the secretary have any meetings other than the group G7 foreign ministers meeting, or are you
I
going to
don't
be people on
believe
the
so.
sidelines?
I don't believe so, but we'll keep you all posted over the day tomorrow.
Speak at all in a public setting, for example, in the opening session?
I think there may be a camera spray at the top of the plenary, is my understanding.
Yep.
There may be, I can double check, but we don't have a press availability given the amount of time we're there.
But do you expect him to, I mean, does he have remarks at that, or is that just a quick camera spray?
I'm not sure. I'm
Okay.
happy to check, but if it's with all the foreign ministers, I'm guessing it's just a quick photo.
Can I just ask, sorry if I missed this at the very top, did you address the Blackwater
I did
sentencing
not.
yesterday?
I did
Can I
not.
ask for the reaction to the,
What?
Good catch.
sorry, thank you.
Well, we respect the court's decision in this case and have no comment regarding the findings. The decisions here refer you, I think, to the Department of Justice for any comment that it would wish to make. As you know, following the tragedy there, the department took a number of steps to strengthen oversight of private security contractors, such as moving quickly to improve investigative policies and strengthening procedures for use of force and less than lethal force by security contractors.
So are you confident that the procedures that you took in the wake of this incident mean that it's unlikely any such incident could occur again in a different country, obviously? But
That certainly was the goal of undertaking this, to put in place better and more robust oversight, of course, to make sure that we had better rules and regulations for private security contractors.
But it didn't lessen your willingness to work with private contractors in such situations.
Well, in some places we have to for a variety of reasons, but that's why I think the Diplomatic Security Bureau, but others here who deal with this issue, went to great lengths to make sure we had in place what we needed here. Thank you. Thank you, guys.